me, same person.
Actually, I can probably do it without glasses. I think people can see my eyes. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We are live. We're on time tonight. I was just taking off my glasses and I can still see the computer screen, so what the heck, let's go forward. This is IDAGIO Live. It's Thursday evening. I am Thomas Hampson, and this is IDAGIO, the place where classical music happens. And it's really happening. As I've said before, very often with me, it's like the computer game for children learning history. Where in the world is Carmen Miranda? And tonight, Carmen, Tom, is in Vienna in a hotel room. But more importantly, I have tracked down my guest, the wonderful, amazing, headline grabbing, interest rippling. You've been called a super talent, and I take them at their word. But this is Jonathon Heyward, and we're going to have a wonderful conversation. We've never worked together. I'm not sure if we've ever even shook hands, but that's part of the fun of this interview series, to get to know new colleagues and get to know musical ideas. And I think we're going to have a wonderful conversation about you, Jonathon, because you can tell us what it's like to hit the big time. But first of all, I mean, you really are on a roll, and I don't want to make you uncomfortable or overly flatter you, but you know, you're there, you're building it. People are confident that we've got one foot in a step of the other. The reactions of musicians to you as a musician and conductor is overwhelming and extremely exciting. You're really good news, but maybe a lot of people don't understand what it means to be 25, having had all of this. I mean, if you read your bio, you'd think you were 45, but never mind. So I just want you, you know, I've invited you over for a glass of wine. Tell me who you are. I'm very curious, first of all, you're born, I believe, in England, but you find yourself, no, born in America.
Yeah, born in America. So I was actually, don't let the silly accent fool
Well, are you American?
I am American. So I was born in Augusta, Georgia, you know, Jesse Norman territory. And I was raised in Charleston, South Carolina. So this accent, please don't let it get you, Thomas. It's an absolute hoax. It's funny.
You know, through my whole career, people always say, "What's your accent? What's your accent?" And finally, I just said, "You know, in America, we call it Midwest pretentious."
No,
I mean, if you speak to people who don't speak English or whatever, I get that. Anyway, I didn't really see, there you are, ladies and gentlemen. I just, you would think I've done my homework. I thought I'd done my homework. I thought you were a transplanted Brit who came back and so forth. All right, tell us the story. Tell us, Jonathon, who you are. And by the way, I'm starting a sociological experiment at your expense. I think I've discovered a new equation of how many different ways you can write the two names, Jonathon and Philip. And I'm absolutely his. When I come across these names now, whether it's Jonathon, Yon with an H, Jonathon, you know, and no sooner did I get that finally figured out with your name, then here comes Heyward with an E, Heywar. What is wrong with your parents? Why could they just?
No, I don't know. I wish I could tell you. Well, there is a funny story about Jonathon, which is I didn't actually know until I was probably in high school, the end of high school, because I finally looked at my social security card for the first time, and my mum did as well for the first time. And she didn't even realize that it was Owen on my social security card.
Oh my goodness.
Because of course, she, you know, not to go into details, but she had a cesarean with me. So she was completely drugged. And when she was writing down the name, she put Owen instead of A-N. So I had been spelling my name incorrectly, technically, since I was in, 18 or something.
So you signed up for Little League as Jonathon.
Yeah, exactly. Look at all my high school stuff. It's all that stuff. Track and field, tennis, all that stuff is A-N. All is A-N.
I don't want to embarrass you, but do you have a middle name?
I do. Elliot. It's a bit more sophisticated, I guess. Easier
to. What is it?
Elliot.
Oh, that's very sophisticated. Oh, well, you're going to have to be careful because we've already have one John Elliot.
Oh, that's right. Oh, gosh.
Yeah. Stick with the Jonathon.
Yes. Oh, that sounds very That's probably the best pronunciation I've heard of it so far, actually.
That's very funny that that would happen. The Phillips, the other Phillips, with a double P or a double L or one L or I've even had someone, honest to God, had a Philip with one L, one P, but double I.
Oh, that's very.
I said, what is that, Philippe?
With
Was
the
your
eyes,
mother,
you have the
was she
eyes. It's
angry when
easy.
she wrote your name?
Yes, precisely.
All right. So you're a born American. You've been traveling, but so what was your beginning musical memories like?
Yeah.
What went on?
So like I said, I was born in Augusta, Georgia, and not there long enough really to kind of be there in school. So I actually started school in Charleston, South Carolina,
Right.
and I guess some would consider that I was a bit late to the music scene. My family are all very much music lovers, but none of them are musicians.
Okay.
So for me, it was kind of a completely, and still is, a quite random track. And I didn't start. I started initially singing in my elementary school chorus, and so I was probably about 10, I think 9 or 10, something like that. And I had a horrific experience as a soloist. I forgot the words to a patriotic US song.
Oh
And
my God! If that's a horrific experience, I'm a horror show.
But I suddenly realized then I had this crazy stage fright because I would practice it. I mean, you talked to my mum. I'd practice it days in and days out in the house, and I was fine. I'd memorized these words. It was completely fine. And then I got so nervous. I remember the feeling. I remember everything about it. I remember the clothes that we were supposed to wear. We had red shirts and white shoes and the church and everything. And I just remember completely bombing it.
Oh my God.
So my mother decided that it would be a good idea next year, and when I went to middle school, to pick a different art form, and so I did, and I picked the strings department at my local middle school, and then and I sure hope now they had an amazing free strings program, and so you could just sign up, and I did, and
Is this a public school place?
exactly, yes, it was a
Yeah,
public
but
school.
Jonathan, this is remarkable because I grew up, in private and public school, but it was all band, band, band. And I would have loved to learn, and we're talking about the cello, right?
Yes, exactly, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I would have loved it, but there was only one family in our church group that had and the wealthy ones, and they had a violin and a cello, and unfortunately their son wanted to play the cello, and so that was it. So I played the cornet,
Oh,
like every other fool across across the state of Washington. I mean, we had more trumpets and cornets, probably still do. Anyway,
yeah.
that's amazing that you had in the public school system access or such a cultivated string program. That is unusual to me.
It is. It
The
was.
choral not the choruses all over. Americans
Yeah.
love choruses and a big church tradition. We all grew up singing in the choir. I'm sorry you had that experience because because singing in the choir was one of the great joys. So at 10 is when you pick up the cello.
Yeah. So about 10, I decided to pick up the cello. But before that, I was supposed to pick the violin and, follow all my friends. But the day came to, picking up the instrument. And the line was out the door for the violins, and no one was in line for the cellos. So I decided very serendipitous,
And what about piano?
No piano at that point. No, I hadn't even thought about it. And I loved, growing up. I really wanted to learn. I really did. My cello professor cello teacher had a piano in his house, and we could barely make means really to give me myself cello lessons. So piano lessons were kind of not going to happen for a few years really.
Wow.
But I was very, very lucky with my cello teacher because we didn't have the means. So we had a barter system where I would come to clean his house for lessons, and that's why we did it. So although I loved the instrument, I love piano, and I really wish I had lessons. It's something that I didn't get into my conservatory years at Boston
All
Conservatory.
right. And
But
did you just immediately take to the instrument?
I did. I mean, of course, it was very silly, the story about just going up and picking it up, but I fell in love with it instantaneously. I remember it was such a kind of, from a very young age, I remember it being such a sanctuary. It was a place, for the first time, I had my own thing, and it was this music world that I could just kind of dive into, and I'd practice endlessly, and I just loved it. I just absolutely loved it, and the fact that I got to pick up a free instrument, like you said, which is such a luxury. And if it wasn't for the public school system in the Charleston County area, I certainly wouldn't have had that start easily.
Wow. What
Easily.
a testament. That's fantastic.
Mm.
So when did a little later comes the conducting thing, but was there a time when you thought, oh, if I could just play the cello as a living, if I can be in an orchestra, if I can, whatever
Yeah.
that is that how it, or was it just, did it grow with you as you started as a young man thinking about, what are you going to do with your life, Jonathan? Kind of thing.
No, I wish my life was that planned. It wasn't. It was another, silly story, which goes along the lines of that. One day, my music teacher in middle school, it was in eighth grade, I believe, was ill, and we needed someone because we had a concert the next day. We needed someone to take the rehearsal, to get us through the pieces. And the substitute teacher was not a musician. He was a lovely man named Mr. Day. He was a really gorgeous soul, but he was not a musician. So we had to pick someone in the orchestra basically. So we did the most sensible thing, which is put all of our names in a hat, shake it around, and then pick the person who would
I
actually.
love it.
And I was the first one to get picked.
By the way, that's not a silly story. That's a serendipitous story.
Yes. Well, a lot like the life, my whole musical life is a bit like that, really. And so it happened, and I was
Do you believe in serendipity?
Yes, I do. I very much do. I very much.
That's why I always like. That's why I always like that. What is that expression? The quote: "Fortune favors the prepared mind." In other words, be in a place that serendipity can actually offer you a cup of coffee. If you're waiting for stuff to happen,
Yes.
it ain't going to happen.
No.
If you're really like, obviously you were passionate, you're studying, you're in it, and things start to pop. They start to happen.
Yeah.
But also, what's so remarkable, and you're right to be thankful, you quickly were able to lock into those things that you were passionate about. My dad always said, if you're making your living doing what you love, it doesn't matter what you do. That's what you do. That's who you are. That's it.
Absolutely.
My father had nothing to do with music, and he was deeply concerned that I was, heading off into, I might as well said I'm going to I'm going to hunt wild boar in New Zealand or something. I mean, he just was. I mean, that's a really ridiculous analogy, but never mind.
No, I know what you mean.
So you get that. So was there any of that kind of pushback or did your folks just love the fact that you were just this wonderfully musical guy? And by the way, apropos Little League, did you still play sports and have an active, junior high school life?
I mean, the short answer is not as active as kind of your normal American teenager, but I did love sport. I loved tennis. I played a lot of tennis, and I never got into group sports, but because I went to an art school in the end. So after I had auditioned after this 1 year of cello, I auditioned to this art school, which is where I had this sort of discovery of conducting. And it's called the Charleston County School of the Arts, and another place
quite famous, I think.
Yeah, I mean it's certainly well known in the area. And
hard to get in.
Say it again.
Hard to get in.
Well, yes, because I was waitlisted.
And how old were you at this time?
At this time, must have been about 11 or 12. So I barely started playing. I mean,
you realize this is only 14 years ago. I mean, I've got shoes older than you are. This is fantastic. I remember having, your colleague Klaus Mekele, who is he's become very good friends. He's a lovely guy. And I remember we were talking about him also starting. And he said, I've been doing this for some years. No, I started that piece a long, long time ago. And what, were you 12? And he said, yeah.
Sounds about right.
So good for you guys. It's fantastic. All right. So you're in this wonderful arts school. You've had this experience, but you're really passionate about the cello. Is it also kind of turning into a huge passion for music in general?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, for classical music, because in the house, in my house growing up, there was a lot of jazz. There was a lot of rock and roll. There was,
Of
a
course.
lot of different genres of music going on. Classical music just wasn't there yet. And so for me to kind of open up this new world as well was amazing. And so then I got really acquainted with the local symphony orchestra, and kids don't do this, but I used to skip class to go see rehearsals, and and I was addicted to it. I
Fantastic.
was absolutely in love with this new art form. And I think at a certain point in high school, after this moment in eighth grade where I stood up and finally got rid of the nerves and just did it, what I fell in love
You
with.
got revenge on your choral outing.
Yes, yes, precisely. Yes, pick up my pity and try to make amends to it. But I what I fell in love with immediately was the idea of the score, and still to this day, this idea that as a cellist, I was reading one line and doing my own part, but with a string orchestra, I had 5 lines to look at on a piece of paper, and in seeing how all that came together in such a collaborative way
Right.
was something for me that I still to this day, it was what I love so much, is this idea of collaboration, this idea of making something much bigger than one human being. And that's the beauty of, and the luck that I feel as a conductor that I am able to do.
Wonderful.
And so I think with that our concept and our idea, by the end of that experience and kind of going into high school, I knew that I wanted to become a conductor. I really did. I was kind of at that point. So this is now we're getting into, that was about 14 years old. And I remember making this decision, and I went up to my high school teacher, who was still at this art school, was a middle school and high school. And I said to her, Miss Sarah Fitzgerald, I'll never forget it. I want to become a conductor. What can we do? And she let me conduct once a week the high school symphony orchestra. And so I had, by
Wow.
the end of my experience, I had such a great kind of vast repertoire, but also confidence to get in front. Finally, had the confidence to get in front of people. I was a freshman conducting seniors. And that is like, it was. I remember the first year being completely daunting, and I really didn't like it. But in the end, what the experience that it gave me was immense. And so I felt so, by the end of my high school years, I felt so comfortable on the podium, that of course I knew I had a lot to learn, without a
Yeah.
doubt. But just that kind of breaking through and getting used to what it means to be a collaborator, what it means to get these sounds together and things. I think I learned a lot of that actually while in high school.
Did you play a lot of chamber music? Because I mean, apropos hearing the voices, I mean that is something even as a singer that, I mean, I've always been the same way. I know exactly what you mean. I'd rather work with an orchestra just with a piano. I love my pianist, and we've worked on, I don't need to say that, but being with an orchestra, a small ensemble, a bunch of other musicians doing other things, making the same music, you're together,
Mm.
your ears just, your mind goes like that. But again, you're right. When you're playing or you're singing, your line is in relationship to everything. But when you're conducting, you're relationing all of these other things. And that must be just, a
Mm.
wonderful tapestry. I get that. So who were your cellist idols
Oh
or
gosh,
are?
list. I mean, I remember, I remember seeing Yo-Yo come to Charleston for the first time when I was in fifth grade. Actually, when I just started, and to the point he came. We found him backstage very quickly before he left, and I have my first Suzuki book, which is these very
Yeah,
beginner books, and he signed my Suzuki book, and so he will always be an idol. I've met him several times, and he's just the most lovely man with the
yeah. Isn't
most.
he wonderful?
He's just so lovely, but his sound is absolutely just immense and lovely. And of course, Rostropovich then became a huge fan of. I mean, I was a huge fan of his. Um,
Did your folks get you records or recordings? Or, of course, you're the Spotify generation. I don't know if that was always there, but I mean, like Pablo Casals,
yes, of course, yes, Casals as well. And
Fournier.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, the list goes on. And I think for me, like conductors, it's more about the repertoire that they played and and I loved listening to particular repertoire to what they were playing. So Fournier was the Bach suite for me.
So where again is this art school you were in, and what age, from when to when?
So it's in the Charleston County School of the Arts, it's called, and so it's in Charleston, South Carolina. And it was for 14 to 18 was high school, and then what does that do? The maths beforehand is
And I have to ask, American to interracial?
Yes, yes.
Completely. Right.
As in I am. Is that what you're asking?
Well, no, I mean the school as well. I
Oh
mean,
yes, absolutely. Well, that was the beauty of the school. That was the absolute beauty of the school because the identity, and of course, I am interracial. My father was African American, and my mother's Eastern European. So I've got a mix of myself. But definitely interracial within the school for sure. And that was an amazing thing in the South. And I only can reflect on that now at the beauty of all these different friends from all these different socio-economic backgrounds as well, because it was purely on your talent. It had nothing to do with how much money you had. It had everything to do with if you could pass the audition. And I, I think I've a slightly not naive, but I remember kind of going to Boston and after my studies at Charleston County School of the Arts and thinking, what an amazing, diverse bubble that was. That is not what you get at every Southern high
right.
school or middle school now, is it? And we know that, but I having reflected on that, it was such an amazing, enriching part of my life, not only musically but culturally, actually.
The thing is, I think that you and others of your colleagues, and I think more now your generation than ever, especially considering the massive unrest in America. Once again, although I've been around this block enough. We're all, in my generation, we keep looking at each other and saying, "Is this finally the tipping point? Are we finally going to move forward?" But that's not really what I want to say. What I think is that we simply underestimate the power of the message that performing arts academies and interracial integrated performing arts centered schools are the absolute emblematic storyboard of an integrated society.
Absolutely.
Everybody grows, everybody's for everybody understands everybody, and you're not looking, oh, that white girl did that and that black boy did that and that Hispanic, well, who would have thought he could have, I mean, that just doesn't exist. And all of this polemic that we're stuck inside of right now, it is the arts education that can actually break through this deafening noise of nonsense and say, be human about it, whether you become a professional or not. And so I hope you get to tell this story often and loud. And even now that you've become so centered in England and in Europe, it's very important that you and your journey as an American are you that you can tell this story and both for Americans and for Europeans. We are in desperate need of sane stories.
We are, and I mean, I couldn't agree with you more, Thomas. I mean, I think the the, the thing is that I remember not really ever thinking about, really truly ever thinking about race until I left that kind of amazing,
Wow.
because I never thought about my skin color in that
Did
way.
it happen? Did it happen in Boston? That's interesting. If I can, I don't want to make you uncomfortable, but I think it is very interesting for people. And I've had so many wonderful conversations with African American colleagues, and I think it's so important. I'm always trying to find a way that we can together identify this nonsensical figment called other. Which really should not even be part of the American vernacular. I mean, we're built on the supposed ecumenity of our culture, but nevertheless, that's another conversation. But did you identify as an African American early on, or was there an epiphanal moment where, Bush, no, you're actually you're a person of color, son? I mean, was there an ugly moment?
I mean, I think if there was ever, it would probably be post School of the Arts.
Okay.
But it's a difficult thing for me as well because I'm part and part. I'm
Right.
genuinely of two halves. So I am the integrated story. I come. I grew up Russian Orthodox because my mom is from Eastern
Wow.
European, and my dad's side is Southern Baptist. So I mean, it's when you talk about yeah, precisely, exactly. So I mean, I am that. I am exactly that kind of that combination, that integration. And so for
Fantastic.
me, this identity labeling, I mean, personally, I have a true issue with it, because the amazing feeling that I felt while I was at the Charleston County School of the Arts was that I was a human. And I
Right.
think that what we have lost as a society is that kind of ideology that actually we are just humans. And in a very weird way, I think
Well put.
the pandemic has kind of enhanced that in a way. We're all affected by COVID-19, and no human being on this planet has not been affected by COVID-19. And I think I always try to see the glass half full instead of half empty. But in a way, I think that's something that I hope that we can take away from this, because we're all affected. We will all have been affected during these times in different ways. But I think that is something that we have missed as a society for a very long time. Not just in the States, although in the States is certainly a lot more than in other places. But I think we have lost that kind of basic understanding. And what I think in my life, and what I feel so lucky really to have it as a part of my life, is that music can truly completely put aside these differences and really get to the human existence. Really get everyone to understand the purity and the camaraderie around the human.
I agree completely. To me, the differences at that point become the various prisms through which you're looking at the real story. And actually, that was one of my next question. I mean, you're starting off, you're a young guy, you've got your repertoire, you've vast experience, yada, yada. Whether they think you're English or American or whatever you are, have you had people say, oh, well, I'm not sure that repertoire is really, why would you be into Mozart, or well, the Beethoven, we're going to let the Huda, there's a lot of, a lot of Italians that would love to do Strauss, and they just keep getting thrown in the opera and they won't let them do it. Italians can't do French repertoire, and the Americans, what the hell do they know about Russian and all that? Are you heading, is that part of your world now? Is that a part of a young conductor's world?
It's a very good question. I don't allow it to be, because I think
Yeah.
the biggest thing for me is that I know what music I can convey really well. I'm starting to, and I'm still, don't get me wrong, I'm still learning the repertoire, and I
Of
still
course.
have a lot to learn. But what I feel very strongly of, particularly actually to segue into eventually into the LSO concert, is Stravinsky and Dvorak. I have a really huge passion for both of these composers, and I would never let anyone tell me otherwise. And equally, of course, I also enjoy women composers and black composers as well. But I enjoy it because I love their music. I'm not searching. I'm not just searching them out because I'm trying to tick a box. I'm interested in what their music is like. That to me is the most important, because if I don't believe in their music, then there's no point in me in trying to interpret it.
Good for you. Have you started a piece and started working on it just because you know it's going to come up, and you thought, I need to put this away. I'm not ready for this piece yet. This is
Plenty, plenty. Well, the joy of being in lockdown and having no work was to finally crack open some scores where I actually have said that in the
okay.
past, because I hadn't had the time to kind of really focus on it, or I didn't feel I was mature enough. But yes, 3 years ago I was thinking about opening the score to Mahler 6, and I remember starting it and thinking, this is just so not.
And you hadn't actually started the other Mahlers?
No, no, I specifically wanted Mahler 6. I don't know why. I think it was after I must have heard an amazing recording or something. but lo and behold, I get to do it now with the Nordwestdeutsche Philharmonie and my orchestra in Herford in January. Hopefully, we'll see how it goes.
Fantastic.
So now I find myself doing it. But
Will you go backwards and pick up maybe one or three or something like that?
yes, no, absolutely. Eventually, I mean, I love exploring them, and you know, there's a difference between really heavily studying it and then kind of plotting through
Yeah,
and
of course.
trying to understand the trajectory, of course, of Mahler. But of
No,
course, I know my
you're,
dream is to go through all of them.
you've got different stews on the stove.
Yes,
Let them cook.
exactly.
You would be surprised how many of your younger of your colleagues, younger than me, and because I've obviously spent my life devoted to the music of Gustav Mahler, will talk to me, and they've even perhaps even been farther along in their career. I mean, they're doing the operas and that kind of stuff. And that's how we have this contact. And they say, oh, you'll be happy to know, Tom, I'm heading into the world of Mahler. Oh, how exciting! Oh, yes. Mahler 9. I just can't believe what a great piece this is. And I said, well, yeah. And do you hear the other symphonies in it? What are the so
Very true.
good
Very
for
true.
you. Good
Yeah.
for you. It's a little bit somebody, I'm sorry, a young singer who's not necessarily very experienced in the repertoire decides that Winterreise is the only thing that really should be sung. And I can understand that sentiment, but you cannot understand Winterreise in Schubert's mentality, his ecosystem, and certainly not how he wrote songs without knowing a good deal, at least knowing a good deal of other repertoire
Yeah.
of his. You need to grow up with these with
Yeah.
these with these composers. I've
No,
always enjoyed finding the voices of the composers as I've learned new pieces. But
yeah.
so you're learning a great deal of music. Your schedule has been blown apart by COVID. Are you still up with Sir Mark at the Halle?
Yeah, no, no, not sadly, not anymore. My tenure ended around this time last year, actually.
All
So
right.
I've been a year away, and my lovely colleague Deliana is starting there actually, I believe this week. But yeah, so it's been a very weird, well, a limbo period for me in a way because I'm getting out of such a big job in many ways as the assistant conductor of the Halle to now graduating to chief conductor at the Nordwestdeutsche Philharmonie.
What, and this is a question I'm legitimately asking, but I know that it's on the tip of so many people, their tongue as they're listening to this. What does an assistant conductor do?
This is a very good question. I
I
think
mean, the simple answer is everything, but
yes,
break it down for us. You were 2 years with one of the most interesting, demanding, self-disciplined conductors in our business. Sir Mark Elder has this phenomenal reputation of detail and fascination of detail. I remember when I was studying Wozzeck, and I managed to find his YouTube lectures on Wozzeck. My mouth dropped open. I thought I'd started, learning the score, and I realized that, I just a complete bumpkin. I had no idea it was amazing. He's an amazing man. We've had so many conversations. So what does an assistant conductor do, and what does an assistant conductor from Mark Elder do?
yes, those are two different things. I think. I think look, it changes from orchestra to orchestra, of course, and
Okay.
but I can specifically talking about the Halle. I felt it was three in one. So I was the music director of the youth orchestra, the Halle Youth Orchestra there, brilliant, brilliant musicians, young musicians there in the Greater Manchester area. I was the lead conductor for all of the education concerts and community outreach concerts. The education department there is the one of the best in the world, hands down, and they get to about 20,000 school students a year. So you can imagine how many concerts we have to play. But it's one of the most enjoyable parts of my job there was doing those concerts. And then, of course, like you said, the last part of the job is assisting Sir Mark. And I think, you know, for me, it was a perfect, another kind of serendipitous segue from the Royal Academy of Music. I had really done a lot of technical work with my brilliant professor Sean Edwards. She
Well,
really kind of
he's a legend.
yeah, yeah, and she just really worked on me
I'm
so.
sorry. She, I meant she. Sorry.
Yes, yeah, yeah, yeah. No, she's absolutely legend, and she she's one of the best teachers, conducting teachers in the world, full stop. But we had an intense 2 years of just really getting my technique absolutely spot on. And then going directly from the academy to the Halle, I then learned how to put those skills in the real world and alongside another mentor, which was, of course, Sir Mark Elder. To have his guidance over the 3 years is remarkable, as you can imagine. He's someone who, of course, knows the business inside and out. He also knows how to help young conductors get to the next step. And that's another thing that doesn't happen often.
Yeah.
If you're an assistant conductor somewhere, the music director may not have time or really carve it out, actually make the time to sit with you, to talk to you, to learn about what your musicianship is, and then kind of steer you in a certain direction. And so Mark did all of that and more. And with his kind of walking encyclopedia of knowledge as well, which was completely overwhelming the first year. But as you get into it and you get to know him and you get to know his music making, then you understand it and I would be lying that it was a huge influence in my life.
Sure.
The way I study scores is completely different than when I was before him, than before to after. It's completely different.
Can you give the layman, much less a very curious musician like me, can you give me a couple of examples
of
score study?
Oh yes, so I mean, he introduced me to the old Bob Raleigh style of looking at scores, and that's kind of literally line by line. So going through every single, from cover to the end of the book, and it takes time. It takes time to do these things, which is why I try to prepare my scores 3 months in advance, because it takes time, and you need the time to do it. But boy, do you feel the confidence of being able to pull out every little detail. And like you said, Sir Mark is an amazing artist for detail. I mean, he's just the way that he pulls it out, but also the way that he presents the detail. Also another thing, it's not just the detail for detail's sake, it's detail to serve the music. And for me, that was
yeah,
learning curve for me, absolutely.
And does that system, by the way, an older colleague, and I'm going to let him remain nameless, but a very significant conductor of even a generation beyond me, told me once that he loved the development of writing software, specifically Sibelius, because it helped him study orchestra scores. And we were doing some Strauss songs together, which are extremely complex. And if you don't like an orchestra score, you're not going to sing the songs very well. And I'm fascinated. I love the dialogue with instruments. And I being a Mahlerite, Mahler was very specific that very often what you're singing is not as important as as the actual constellation or iconography of the instrumentation that's going on. And that's not just in the cycles, it can happen in any particular song. And it's just, your ears open up, and I'll sing a phrase and I'll look at the string section. I say, no, this is you, this is your solo, and do not accompany me, kind of thing. But anyway, so this wonderful maestro says, and I said, well, how does that work? And he said, oh, well, it takes a little bit more time, but I can now with Sibelius put in each instrument and build my own score.
Right. Isn't that amazing? That's great.
And I immediately thought, as typical lazy, well-employed singer, oh, that's a lot of work. that's a lot of work.
Yeah.
Can you imagine? So it's very it's along that. So I didn't actually realize that was a particular school of thought. I would have thought that would be kind of what you do when you're working an orchestral score. Certainly that's the way I have worked as a soloist.
Yeah.
Looking and seeing where these layers and textures and where the polyphony is commenting or taking you, whatever you want to describe that. Yeah. So what's the other school? Vertical?
Well, yeah, exactly. I mean, I think there's maybe some of my colleagues have expressed that they like to zoom out and then zoom in. which is kind of looking at the very broad structures first, and then they kind of slowly zoom in. I mean, I find that doesn't work for me because I'm lucky if I get through all the details first, and then I zoom out. And it might be too late. Before I'm allowed to zoom out. So for me, I like to look in and then go out, because then when I look into all the detail, for me personally, when I see all the detail, the bigger picture just already makes sense, in a way. Yeah.
Do you sometimes cover up parts as you're looking because you want to stay focused on the winds or even just the English horn and oboe or something like that? I mean, just as
Yeah.
an example.
I don't ever cover it up, but I'm either at a piano playing it through in just one line, actually,
Ah,
really meticulously going through
when
one
did your piano chops come in?
line. I wouldn't say they're chops, to be honest. I'd say it's a bit more like pigeon picking rather than chops. But I do use the piano in order to hear things, because it is
Of course.
particularly big chords and things like that. It is very important, and sometimes if I also particularly with strings, I break up my cello and play through a line, and if it's a string passage as
Good.
well, to get it to understand what it feels like, what that natural, because of course I sadly don't play very often now,
Right.
but if I recollect it and remember it, then I can kind of get myself to remember what it would feel like to play it like this or like that, basically.
What's a first rehearsal like for you with the orchestra?
Depends on what orchestra it is, I guess. But I think, regardless actually of the orchestra, what I try to do first and foremost is listen.
Right.
And that was another thing that I learned from Sir Mark, very, very much, is to do less so you can hear more. And I think that's something, even with my orchestra in Germany, if I haven't seen them for a very long time, and they've been, conducted by different conductors, they're gonna, even their pace with me is not gonna always stay the same. We're in a different time, different day. It's always going to be different. And what I think is always essential, and particularly now with these social distance orchestras, is how to find the pace and the heartbeat of the orchestra, and then tap into that, rather than imposing kind of my ideas. While of course I've got an idea and I know exactly what I want, what I'm often doing at first is trying to find out, how do they move? How do they breathe? What exactly is it? How can I shape that with them? And it's all about that at first. So I'm trying to stay calm, and I'm trying to listen really on the first day, always.
So you're
What else?
starting to have a lot of different orchestras, and some are famous and big, and probably intimidating, or at least, oh, here I am. I better know what I'm doing, kind of thing. One of the reasons we're having this conversation is being a deeply devoted IDAGIO.com person. I get to meet some of you because of the Global Concert Hall. Ladies and gentlemen, the Global Concert Hall series, first of all, back up. IDAGIO.com is a streaming platform. It's not a record shop. Think of it more like a music library in your pocket. And what's online, meaning what's on your browser, can be on your app, on your iPhone, on your iPad, however you want to have it with you. You can make wonderful playlists. The database, it is all just classical music, built by classical musicians, run by classical musicians, classic music musicians, I should say, so that the interface is for classical music and not a forced pop interface trying to get things most of the time wrong in Spotify or Apple. And God bless their wonderful platforms as well, huge record companies, yada, yada. But idagio.com is focused on the classical music experience. And the streaming platform is amazing, and thousands of hours of tracks. Somebody said the other day to me, oh yes, we have something like 18 or 19,000 different classical music composers here. I said, wait a minute, there's 18,000 classical music composers. So you really can, it's right, quite something. Then we had always talked about developing the video side of Idagio, but with the COVID crises in March, the powers to be, Til Gansakovic and his team at Idagio said, we have got to make classical music physically available to people. They need to talk to artists. They need to have people tell them why and what they do. We need to talk about music. It needs to be a bigger community. We're gonna flip this switch and do IDAGIO live. And I of course said I'll count me in. So on Tuesdays I talk about songs with different colleagues, and on Thursdays I just get to talk about music with different colleagues. And then in June was the big development. One of Till's and IDAGIO's dreams was to develop literally a performing digital, well, I want to say platform again, but a digital place. And the difference is I call it the third rail, because everything we do on the Global Concert Hall has three elements. One, there's a paywall, which means the public is to participate in the producing of classical music. And it's not about just collecting money. It's about everybody investing again in this wonderful art form that for the last 4 months was just simply, because we wanted to keep people sane, given away. But because everyone now has a completely new awareness of the digital universe, as it were, and a willingness, quite frankly, forced willingness, if you will, we now produce online. And I think this is not just now, I think this is a new development in classical music, and certainly in higher education as well. We produce for the analog experience. In other words, if it's 5 people in a small studio or 500 in a reduced concert hall, or maybe you get 2,000, it doesn't really matter. The analog is there, but we're not just taking a snapshot of it. We're producing digitally as well for the people who are not physically there, who are going to be watching it on a small screen or a big screen. Obviously, quality is of the absolute essence. But technically, we're in such a new dimension of microphones and films. Quite frankly, on your iPhone 11 or probably soon to be iPhone 12, the cameras are amazing. You hook up a good microphone to that, and you can actually have a wonderful visual experience. Are we replacing the live classical music experience or the value of it? Absolutely not. None of this has any value whatsoever unless you as a listener are compelled to find a way to share the classical music live experience. Going to a concert, going to a chamber music, being with friends. It is a collective experience, and yet what happens to you in that concert is your very personal experience. It is yours to do with what you will. And it will, without question, be part of that stuff that you just have with you that forms what you think are the real values in life. And that's your personal determination. That you couldn't be more democratic of an activity than that. And this is what IDAGIO is devoted to. And that's why I'm so excited about this Global Concert Hall. And then we have amazing debut moments. This is your debut with the LSO, right?
It is.
I got to tell you, I've sung with this, they're a great band, but they take no prisoners. If you get along with them, that means something, Jonathon.
Good to know. No pressure. No pressure.
No pressure. No, but you've already done it. It's fantastic. I mean, you're going to do it, but you already know them. So you're having this, and what day is this? Do you remember?
September 30th.
The 30th of September. Ladies and gentlemen, this is going to be a wonderful night. One, I believe it's also LSO's debut on the IDAGIO platform, isn't it?
I believe so, yes. Yeah.
Exactly. So this is, we've got Vienna coming. There's all sorts of orchestras and all sorts of conductors that are devoted to this availability. And the other thing that is also part of this platform, which is unique, is that there will be a green room. Jonathon will be with you at the end of the concert as you want to drop by for an autograph. It'll only be digital, but you can ask him questions. You can write them in. You can participate that. I think there's probably going to be some sort of pre-concert activities where either you or somebody else are going to say, why in the heck you want to do this piece? I will be there because you're conducting one of my absolute favorite pieces of music. I just am addicted. One, I love Dvorak. My goodness, next to Mahler, it's just, but the New World and the Ninth Symphony is just a miracle. And not just because I'm an American, but yes, probably because there is so much in that piece that that is my story. When I hear those tunes, I'm at home. Now I have to ask you, I've talked way too much. I'm going to put you back on. Do you know, have you studied that the New World Symphony is actually a symphonic version of what maybe potentially was going to be an opera on Hiawatha? Have you ever heard this?
No, please tell me. No, I've never heard of this.
Oh, I got to get you this. Very interesting professor in Los Angeles, Robert Winter.
Right.
And I believe also Joseph Horowitz was also involved in this. And again, please, gentlemen, my apologies if I'm getting this all upside down. I will find this out for you and get it. I'm not upside down in that there is this parallel narrative about the piece.
Right.
But what Robert Winter did, and there's a video produced on it. I believe if you went Dvorak Opera Hiawatha on YouTube, you might come up with it. I'll get you the information because I know it's become quite a scholarly archaeology or a dig, as it were, just about where all these various, sometimes seemingly disjointed moments of melody and harmony within especially the inner movements of the piece, if you understand them as fragments of another potential theater event, kind of like hearing music as Hiawatha was going down the path.
Yeah. I mean, he did that.
Don't get me wrong. It's not program music. That's not what I'm saying it is. But it's got these other layers in it. It's a fun thing.
Well, I mean, it's not really new with him in a way, because of course he was so influenced by folk music in general. So the fact that he was taking folk music in the United States and making it this beautiful, incredibly relatable symphony. I think that's the reason why it's so famous. I think that's why Neil Armstrong took it to the moon, infamously. It's so familiar. And I think I'm so pleased to do this work. And I think now I've actually, I've done it several times, but I've told myself to not look at anything beforehand, any of my old notes, and to really kind of accept it as a new piece. And what I find is something completely different because of the world that we're in now, the new world that we're kind of in now, excuse the pun. And I think what's amazing about this piece is how it is so incredibly relatable to the ideology of what a new world
is. Right. It's a love letter from Dvorak to the New World. He was not happy and he wanted to go home, but he got it. He knew what was going on. Absolutely. And he just really wanted Americans to embrace all of the roots of their society. And, of course, he had that remarkable assistant, Henry T. Burleigh, who was, an African-American who was accepted in the National Conservatory, by the way, once again, back to music schools. The National Conservatory that Dvorak ran was specifically grounded and founded by this amazing woman, Mrs. Thurber, for specifically talented minorities, children. Everybody should be studying music that is talented and wants to study music, and I don't care where they come from. And this was remarkable and provocative, and Dvorak took some of that tremendous idealism and put it in some letters to the editors, got enormous blowback. It's an incredible story, an incredible age. But I mean, the idea that this Henry Burleigh, the grandson of an American slave in the Civil War, is humming tunes to this wizard master and drinking his beer under his beard, just wanting to know, trying to put his ear to the soil, and he da da dee da 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 dee da 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 da. And by the way, he had a wonderful voice. He was a wonderful musician, and he applied for the job of chorister at the St. John's on Fifth Avenue. And they said, well, now actually, we're not hiring black people this year.
There you are.
Born from America. Yeah. Oh my God. You got a lot on your shoulders. You're wonderful.
Oh, there we are.
It's all part of it. What else I want to ask you? Now, where you actually are the music director of an orchestra in Germany, correct?
Yeah, so I'm the chief conductor designate at Nordwestdeutsche Philharmonie.
Westdeutsch-Rundfunk?
That's right. Philharmonie
A Philharmonie. And where is this?
in Herford.
Ah, right in Erfurt. Perfect.
Yeah, yeah.
Good for you. And how long will you be there?
Well, we stopped 3 years for now, and see how
Wonderful.
it goes. But it was an amazing kind of a moment of love at first downbeat, if you will. I always remember the first rehearsal, and I made my Concertgebouw debut with them actually, and that was of course a very 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 special moment. And
Wow, you've done Dvorak now with the Concertgebouw.
No, not with Nordwestdeutsche. Just I made my debut with Nordwestdeutsche Philharmonie at the Concertgebouw. We didn't do.
Oh, I see. I get it. Yeah. No. Well, yeah. That's also. Isn't that a wonderful hall?
Oh, it's amazing. It's absolutely my favorite. I can't help but grin every single time I walk into the conductor's room. I mean, it's just, I can't. It's just amazing. Absolutely amazing.
I wish you many times of that. And Erfurt's a wonderful that whole area that was reunited.
Yeah.
I might have been the only American that cried. Oh, Jenna and Weimar, they're back home. Oh, Schiller and Goethe, rest in peace.
Yeah, absolutely. It's an amazing.
So this is fantastic. But you've got a busy guesting schedule as well, and we hope that the COVID regs will relax and you'll take care of yourself. You're going to be flying a lot.
Yes.
How much do you study a day? How long? How many hours?
I always aim for minimum of 6 to 8 if I can get it. I'm always great at 7 o'clock in the morning, so I wake up go straight to my desk, and because I don't get any emails or any phone calls, and I love that moment of 2 hours of complete just me and the scores, and it's my golden moments. And then normally
you're not going out for a jog or a half an hour of yoga.
I do that, but I have to say I do it after. I do it after.
Okay. As long
and all that stuff.
Where's home?
Home for the moment is a little village called Sandwich in southeast Kent, but we're in between moving at the moment, so trying to figure out. You can imagine moving during a crisis is quite a thing. So there we are.
Well, Jonathon, Heyward with an E. We are so grateful to get to know you, and everybody's in your corner. Everybody's looking for great things. The LSO. I mean, whatever's up, and I'm looking forward to some recordings. The possibility of making your own recordings and having your own platform on IDAGIO. This is also a dream of the company. It doesn't have to be a record company. Nothing against the record companies, but we can do things that allow artists or organizations to be in their public's radar and sphere without all of the encumberment. And I think that that's a wonderful development, and I think that's a very powerful. So we will be looking forward to some wonderful live recordings from Erfurt in I hope the immediate future. But right now it's September 30th. Everybody dial in, go get your ticket. It's not very expensive, and it's a wonderful experience actually to be on these live global concert halls.
Thank you so much for having me, Thomas. I really
not even a question. It's our privilege and our pleasure. Be well. Go get them, ladies and gentlemen. You're looking at a human rocket ship.
Thank you so much, Thomas. Thank you very much.
Take care of yourself. Bye bye.
Now, bye bye.
All right, everyone. Thank you for joining us.